Welcome back to Between Two Racks with the Kilo Crew. Today's episode, another one on everybody's favorite, hypertrophy. So, let's kick it. I like this first question because I don't think it's necessarily true, but I understand why someone might ask it based on discussions we've had previously. So, hypertrophy. Why does Steph hate it?
So, I don't hate hypertrophy.
That would be weird.
Because I started lifting when I was 11 for the main and only goal of gaining hypertrophy. So I like having or developing hypertrophy, but the reason why I kind of dislike talking about hypertrophy now is simply because, well, okay. I'll rewind by telling the story I talked about this morning to Kelsey and Alex and Pork. So when I was younger, when I was a young coach and I first attended like continuing education, like at 21 or something, I remember like Alex and I went to Toronto to do a Charlie Francis and Ian King seminar. It was a 2-day seminar. And the title of the seminar was Bigger, Faster, Stronger with Ian King and Charlie Francis. I went there, but to be quite honest, for the one and only goal of learning about the bigger part. That's all I really cared about, because I had such that, I was not playing football. I was not doing martial arts anymore. My only goal was to be as jacked as possible and to look like Larry Vinette. So, and because I was struggling to put on real size, I couldn't wait but to learn all the tricks about hypertrophy. And then I remember I'm listening to thinking about it now. Charlie Francis and Ian King, I went there to learn about hypertrophy. Come on. But anyways, like the seminar keeps on going and going and going. And then at one point I asked the question, okay, but when are we going to talk about the bigger part of the equation? Then Charlie Francis freaking lashed out on me, flipped out. I was like, we don't give a shit about hypertrophy. Hypertrophy, it's easy. You like focus on what we're talking about. The hypertrophy will come as a side effect. But I left the seminar and a little bit annoyed because I felt like I didn't get that little secret about how to gain hypertrophy. So in my early 20s, I thought that it was something super secretive and magical about gaining muscle mass that all of these elite coaches weren't talking about. They were like keeping it for themselves, and that's why I couldn't grow. And
they were keeping it from you.
And it's only later on, as I kept on training and being consistent with training, that I realized, well, now I get it why they don't really talk about hypertrophy, because at the end of the day, hypertrophy is quite simple. If you train really, really hard and you eat really, really hard and you recover really, really hard and you do it consistently all the time, standard strength training will lead to an increase in hypertrophy. But I really thought it was a little magic secret. I didn't really understand that it was all about the consistency of all of the facets of the lifestyle associated to strength training that led to increase in hypertrophy. Learned that later on. But I just feel that a lot of the younger coaches that come to our courses, without saying it, kind of have that feel.
Same feeling.
They think that there's this little thing that the elite coaches know about hypertrophy that they're not telling people, and that's why they're not growing as much as their Instagram star or whatever. So that's why I dislike talking about it, because I just feel that people overcomplicate it. And instead of spending the time building on true strength and blasting their training and recovering and train and recover, they're looking for that little secret magic little freaking thing, and they're trying to make something so simple, so complex, and effective rep this and that. I'm like, it's not that complicated. So to me, it's like when you spend your lifetime studying strength training, you realize that hypertrophy is probably the most simplistic component of the whole strength training part. Like, spend some time learning about power development. You'll realize how simple hypertrophy is. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of talking about it, simply because it's like,
you don't like talking about it, but I'm pretty sure between the morning coffee discussions,
you love talking about it. You like shit talking about it every day.
Porrick and I love talking about the recent trends in the hypertrophy world that drives us crazy. But there's a difference between me and talking to Porrick about stuff that annoys me and teaching it to people. It's not that I don't like teaching it, but I really feel that people like have this stigma.
It's become tribal again. It's like one of those things where you're like, you're either in this camp or you're in this camp, and they try to overcomplicate it, but they're trying to sell something too, those people that come up with these like fancy, like, whatever methods and the secret sauce, as you say.
Yeah, but
the problem is, like, the dirty little secret when it comes to hypertrophy is it just takes years of consistency.
Yeah.
Years and years and years. Like, if someone's jacked in their mid 30s and you're looking at them as the early 20s coach, it's because they've had 15 more years of training than you do, and they've been consistent for 15 more years. That's how they got jacked. It's not anything special that they did.
Yeah, no, it's like in my late teen or early 20s. Yeah. Like I was so convinced that there was a secret like thing that I would read a book or an article and I would apply the new technique, or let's say one macro cycle, and then I would gain, I don't know, like something modest. Yeah. Then that shit doesn't work. Then I would look for something else. That doesn't work. And it got me to even try like super random extreme, like power factor training. I don't know if any of you have ever read that book, but the whole premise of the book was the best way to put on size and strength is to work in very short ranges of motion at top range all the time. So like you would do like basically lockout reps on bench press, lockout reps on squat, and this would trigger hypertrophy because the overall load perceived by the central nervous system and the tissue is so high that it creates mechanical tension to the point where try that. But then I tried a bunch of stuff, like almost thinking that the thing that will work for real, I'm going to look a certain way, I'm going to do it for 12 weeks, and after 12 weeks I should look like Larry Vinette. That was in my mind, and I never found anything that did that, right? So it's only once I realized, you know what, just train properly in a progressive, sustainable manner that favors recovery and builds strength. And if you can bench press 100 pounds for 6 one day, and then you can bench press 200 pounds for 6 one day, well, you're invariably bigger at that point. Yep. So it's this simple.
I think people also have unrealistic expectations of what they can get, like in terms of hypertrophy. Like if you can gain a solid like 5-6 pounds a year, like you're pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you're gonna gain that much weight in like 12 weeks and change your whole look, And that's why the people who are in their 30s and 40s, they've had all those years to build a little bit of hypertrophy year to year, and then they can look a certain way.
Well, it's like remember that story, and when I was 22 and I went from like over a 6-month period, I went from 185 to 240, and I thought it was like just pure muscle, but
and then you saw a picture.
Yeah, it was probably like 85%. It was like pure fat and water. I mean, it just won't happen. If you really want to build real muscle, it takes time, and it takes grind, and it takes repetitiveness. And
especially so much of what we always talk about is how people are such program hoppers, and that won't take you very far in terms of consistency.
Like, I think that's the biggest issue. And it's like, because so my early teens, I was following like that Italian book program and some Arnold stuff. So it was very straightforward. It didn't work because I ate one meal a day and I was training 2 hours a day. So it didn't work. But then I went on to try freaking heavy duty by Mike Menzer, horrible. I tried so many things. Torbjorn Akerfeldt's anabolic burst cycling of diet and exercise didn't do that. Like I tried everything that you can imagine until the day I'm like, okay, well, let's just start doing sound periodized training. And oh, wow, now I actually put on real muscle. So I'm just saying that I just want younger coaches to understand that hypertrophy and strength is not a black and white thing. They're intertwined. So strength train really, really hard, you'll gain muscle. Then you want to break a plateau at one point for one macro, go all out on a hypertrophy specialization. Yeah. Boom, you'll create a second burst in hypertrophy, but then go back to strength. At the end of the day, strength will drive everything.
Yeah, like if someone just concentrates on consistently getting stronger in big compound movements and eating to fuel that performance, they're inevitably put on size. There's no two ways about it if you're constantly getting stronger.
Yeah, and then if you have the hopes of competing in, I wanted to compete in bodybuilding in my early 20s, but I also, if you have the hopes of competing, you need to understand that you need to put on real size first. So like Borg was saying, just put on real size, and big compound lifts, do a good job at that. Then once you have like a solid foundation of size, and then the judges tell you, well, you need more back width, or you need more like outer thigh sweep, or you need more pec development, then go and hammer these muscles and isolate these muscles accordingly. But if you weigh 152 pounds and you want to step on stage and you're already doing like a ton of isolated work to it, I just think it's wasted effort. It's not time yet. You're tiny. Just build real size.
Be a bigger person.
And on the flip side, hopefully all the women who are scared to put on muscle listen to this conversation, and you'll see that it's not that easy to put on muscle. I can't believe that's still a thing that like a lot of women bring up about being scared to put on.
But fortunately, it's also changed a lot where now women are much more into getting stronger and putting on muscle than ever before. So it is shocking that it's still there. But at least now we're in a time where girls are more motivated.
Yes, but that's like in our circle. Like you talk to the average woman who still doesn't really weight train or anything. They still think that they're going to
get bulky.
Get bulky. And even women, no, it's definitely changed in terms of like women wanting to get stronger and
that's pretty cool.
Trying to get stronger and then trying to get more muscle, eat more protein, blah blah blah. But
you also have to keep in mind that I come from an era where, like, at 14, I knew I wanted to be a strength coach, and once I started doing courses with Charles Poliquin and even working with Nelson Ayat and all of these guys, the one thing they kept repeating all the time to me, like knowing that I wanted to be a top strength coach, they always said, Steph, if you don't weigh at least 200 pounds as a strength coach, you're not a serious strength coach. So that was always in my mind.
I think we can adjust that number a little bit.
Like I was a 180 in my early 20s. I'm like, man, like I won't be able to be a strength coach if I'm only 180, so I need hypertrophy.
Coming from Charles, did he ever weigh 200 pounds?
Yeah. Like in his early 40s, like the heaviest he's ever weighed was 210. Like when we did the BioSig in 2001 or whatever in Chicago, he was 210. Okay. Remember when Mark Bistol was like putting the mic on his back because Charles couldn't reach behind his back? He was 210 at that point.
Okay. Yeah, that's usually what happens when guys who shouldn't be 210 become 210.
Yeah, and then
fucking can't move anymore.
But I took that to heart, though. I'm like, man, like I really need to be at least 200.
It's such a funny, like, all right, we're going to put a weight stamp on it. So if you're 6'5",
or like 5'8",
it's the same number. 6'5", 200 looks pretty different.
Maybe that was just their way of motivating me. I don't know, but
So to carry on, because you already mentioned it, how big of a role nutrition plays in terms of hypertrophy. So another question, what kind of nutrition should I follow while doing hypertrophy?
Well, if hypertrophy is the goal, then you should definitely be in a surplus. And in order to put on more muscle than fat in a surplus, you want to make sure that you're lean enough before you start doing that stuff. And in terms of like protein, probably just need like that 1 gram of protein per pound so that you can allow for more carbohydrates. So of your fuel calories in terms of hypertrophy, carbohydrates is more anabolic than fat, so that's why you want to favor. You don't want to be low carb as you're trying to be as you're trying to gain hypertrophy.
I have a question. So for the 1 gram per pound goal, are you including peri-workout nutrition and protein in that goal? Or are they still hitting the 1 gram per pound before the peri-workout nutrition?
Before the peri-workout nutrition.
Because I think that's an important part. And I know personally for me, peri-workout nutrition, as it feels or as I'm like viewing it in terms of when I've been super strict and always taking my peri-workout, is when I have the best results. Yeah. And I don't include that of hitting the 1 gram per pound.
Yeah. And the thing is people don't realize is as you get old, like when you're younger, you can afford to do like maybe 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound because you get that anabolic effect from the protein, the mTOR stimulation, even at a lower, like at 0.7 or 0.8. But as you get older, you actually require more protein to get that same effect. So if you're 60 and you're trying to do hypertrophy, you probably need 1.5 grams of protein per pound, and then on top of that, then you're doing your peri-workout nutrition.
Yeah, and then what's also important to understand is past the age of 35, the satellite cell pool starts diminishing. So by default, you'll need a little bit more protein to fully recover from the training. So like Alex says, the older you get, the more you need to start slowly increasing the amount of protein you're consuming if you want to optimize the hypertrophy response.
I read this cool study that said that if you make sure that in your meal that has protein in it, if you make sure that you have a decent amount of antioxidants, it'll negate the loss of anabolic effect as you get older. So if you have basically vegetables and fruit with your protein, that it makes your meal more anabolic.
So like I'm guessing the mechanism would be because of increased speed of recovery time, so decreased catabolic components?
Well, just the oxidative stress. I mean, we're more under oxidative stress, so it helps with that. I don't know the exact mechanism, but...
Then I know we have to eat in a surplus when it comes to hypertrophy, but it doesn't need to be a huge surplus. Like 10, 20% is more than enough. Yeah. The days of getting really fat with the hopes of putting on 1 or 2 pounds of muscle are sort of behind us.
And it's so sad because you see a lot of like you said, you should kind of be lean a little bit before you're playing with this already. Yeah. And you do see these people that aren't lean, decide to go into a surplus, obviously put on a bunch of fat.
Yeah,
so then it just is this roller coaster of, well, now you put on so much fat, you were trying to just get hypertrophy. Okay, cool. Now you're going to want to go into a giant deficit to lose. Like it's...
Yeah, because we definitely want to be somewhat insulin sensitive before we go into one of these phases because we want to drive carbs a little more so we can fuel the glycolytic type of workouts. It mightn't be highly glycolytic, but we definitely want to favor performance within the session, so we don't want to be doing it lower carbs. So in actuality, you want to be driving the carbs, so you want to be insulin sensitive so you can then store and use those carbs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're insulin sensitive, like carbohydrates can be pretty almost like ergogenic in a sense, like if you're using it like properly. And I mean, I do feel like I know from experience that the timing of your macronutrient intake, especially the carbohydrate, has a huge impact on recovery. And Alex, in the talk you gave the last course, has a huge impact on your ability to replicate high levels of training output in the next session.
Yeah.
So there's so much to carbohydrate consumption.
And then in regards, to carbohydrates for hypertrophy, are you going to recommend it during, post?
During and post. So depending on how many carbohydrates you want to have in the day, you should definitely prioritize having a decent chunk of your carbs in your peri-workout. And then your other meals can still be lower on the carb end, again, depending on how much surplus you need and how many grams of carbs you're shooting for the day. But if you can have them around your peri-workout, then it'll help with the muscle glycogen like replenishment, and then will help really fuel for your next session. If you have them, what is it, like 3 hours, within 3 hours of your training session.
I mean, the sooner the better, because then it allows you to eat your solid meal after. Like it makes it easier to have all of your caloric needs within the day. Because so let's say you're like most people and you naturally eat within a 12-hour window. I mean, that's what we do. That's just our natural thing. Well, you want to have your post-workout, so you're not consuming all of your calories within like 3-4 hours.
And then you also get the cortisol blunting from the higher carbs and the protein, so at least your recovery is going to be started sooner, so you have a better ability to have the repeated efforts in the coming days.
Calming the nervous system faster as well.
And then with carbs, so we're saying intra and post if you can. But if you're not having it, because I know sometimes, well, not now I have it both, but when I use it just intra, you always say my post-workout, if there's no carbs in it, to add glutamine.
Oh, yep. Well, glutamine, I mean, is great just in terms of muscle glycogen replenishment. There was a study that was done with only 8 grams of glutamine was able to replenish glycogen to the same level as 60 grams of carbohydrates. So that's like an easy, like if you're
not wanting,
if you don't want too much carbs, I guess you can do that. But I mean, if hypertrophy is the goal, like, I mean, it's still just do the.
No, but it could happen, right? So let's say you're dealing with an athlete and we have a short off season, and the athlete, you see their blood values and they're crazy insulin resistant. Well, you might want to have a lower carb approach. So in that case, if you still want to drive some hypertrophy, then that glutamine post-workout might be a fair option to do so.
Or for someone who's really like has a huge appetite, then it's a good way to limit the amount of calories that you're getting through your peri-workout to allow them to eat more food like with their meals. So I mean, it just depends on the person.
Because in that same study, they did a combination group, didn't they? That got glutamine and carbohydrates, and that is what actually replenished the most efficiently. So that'd be a way of reducing your total carbohydrates peri-workout, so you can eat more if they still want to eat more, but get the benefit of both.
Yeah, that's a fair point, because some people they can never eat enough. Whereas other people, like I'm one of those, I don't have the biggest appetite in the world. So if I can consume a chunk of my calories in a liquid form peri-workout, it makes my life way easier to put on size.
And then people never really consider for hypertrophy, but hydration status is huge.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are so dehydrated. Your muscles don't. The cells don't function as well if they're dehydrated, if you don't have enough electrolytes. Like electrolytes are required for every single muscle contraction that you have. So if you're dehydrated, and you also, if you're eating those carbohydrates, for each gram of carbohydrate, you need 3 grams of water. So to get that cell to be, big, and you want that muscle pump. You want to be swole.
And then to go along with that, like the better condition you are. So if you have some type of base in terms of conditioning, well, aerobic conditioning most likely, well, then you're facilitating the proper nutrient storage mechanism. So you're emphasizing the hypertrophy response even more. So that's why like doing phases like what you're doing right now, giant sets, is a good thing for hypertrophy in the sense that you're setting the tone for improved mitochondrial function, increased numbers and efficiency of capillaries feeding the muscles, and on and on and on. So you can have better nutrient storage mechanism to favor the anabolic response from the training.
What have you changed your mind on the most in terms of training for hypertrophy? Kind of what you said in the beginning.
Well,
not really.
I haven't really changed my mind because, I mean, I've been a coach for 25 years. I've been applying concepts that I've learned. It was more about fine-tuning the periodization and the volume and the intensity of things. But what I've been doing for the most part works really well in terms of hypertrophy. But the one thing that I will say that's even clearer to me now, I'm not saying that it was not prior to, but now I'm truly understanding the impact of it, is the importance of monitoring and driving volume load upwards to truly drive long-term hypertrophy. And unfortunately, this approach seems to be counter to a lot of recent social media accounts, but I believe in it. I've been doing it for years and years, and there's plenty of research and evidence, and even in the last couple of years, showing the importance of volume load for hypertrophy. So again, it's not that I changed my mind on it, but I'm even more cognizant of the importance of volume load, and I address it even more.
For those listeners that might not know what volume load is,
a synonym would be tonnage, but so technically speaking, volume load is the product of volume and intensity. So let's say you're doing 3 sets of 10, that's 30 reps of volume with 100 pounds. So 30 times 100, that would be 3,000 pounds of tonnage, aka volume load. Volume load is the term that's used in research, but tonnage would be a good.
Yeah, so it sort of depends on how far we go back for what our opinions, how much they've changed. Because, like, I'm sure your opinions changed a lot since you were 18, but it maybe hasn't changed as much in the last 10 years. It's more been refined in the last 10 years. Whereas, like, I know from, like, my earlier days of a coach, I would have separated the idea of hypertrophy and strength training way too much. I had, we're doing a hypertrophy block. That's what we're doing. Whereas now it's like, okay, we're strength training and we're going to bias such and such via different mechanisms or different inputs. But yeah, like that, there's the bigger thing. It's how far do you want to go back to really say I've changed an opinion?
Yeah. I would say this is a personal response. So even before I started weight training, I think I was like 24, 25 when I started weight training. I was always muscular. Even as a gymnast, like I just looked muscular. So when I started weight training to compete, it was, I mean, I had no clue. So then I just started training, and then I like put on a lot of muscle. And then, of course, unfortunately, I was competing in fitness. So they were telling me I was too muscular. So then I went down that track of like trying to lose muscle. So before, I was always scared to put on more muscle. But now, as I get older,
yeah, you wish
now. Well, I mean, I don't regret what I did. I mean,
you're
some
still
of the
muscular.
Things, I'm still muscular, but like, I'm not. Now I try to not lose. Like, I try to put on muscle, as opposed to before in my 20s, I was trying not to put on muscle. Now I embrace the fact that I need to put on muscle and the importance of like having more muscle as a woman as you get into the perimenopausal and menopausal years. So that's my change.
Oh, that's good. And I agree with Porrick in the sense, yeah, maybe when I was 18, like I saw hypertrophy a little differently. It was more segmented like you. But the one thing that's never changed, though, is to really put on size, you need to train your ass off and recover really hard. And that, I don't, my take on this has never really changed. The only thing that I learned later on is you can train your ass off, but if the nutrition does not match the training, forget about hypertrophy. It was almost like when I was younger, nutrition was I'm not saying it was not important, because you kind of knew, because most bodybuilders like were dialed in with nutrition, but in my head as a kid, it's like training builds muscle. So, yeah. But yeah, it doesn't work. It's only once I started paying attention to nutrition that now the muscle mass actually improved.
And then the flip side is true too. If you just like don't train and then you just eat a lot of protein, you're still not going to get that hypertrophy.
Yeah.
And then another thing, you don't need a method for it to be a hypertrophy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. You don't have to go from German volume training to drop sets to trisets to fucking stage system ascending. It doesn't have to be a method. Just strength training and doing it in a systematic way.
Yeah, that's very true.
Well, one of the emails I was answering this morning was someone that was looking over the online courses and then saying, well, I'd like to do the level 1 to earn my level 1, but I work with Gen Pop who want transformations. So why would I purchase the body composition specialization courses, so the fat loss specialization and hypertrophy specialization, over the level 1 bundle? So it's an interesting question, which this is kind of covers all of that, because to me, and that's, you see that a lot of the times, you have these Gen Pop clients coming in wanting a transformation. So yes, the 12-week fat loss or hypertrophy is one to dive in, but is that person going to be able to train hard enough, eat enough, or when you're doing the fat loss specialization, you can't eat in a deficit. So you really have to know which course and training to choose for the client.
But then if they don't have any, if your client has no experience, like you were saying, they won't be able to train hard enough. Like they just don't have, they're not good with the movement. They're not strong enough to lift enough load to get a response from it. So it's like, you may as well just do regular training first.
So Alex is right. That's where it gets complicated with Gen Pop is, yes, every Gen Pop going to a personal trainer, they want to improve body composition. Well, most I would say don't even care about muscle. They just want to be lean. But the problem is then it makes a lot of sense to be attracted towards fat loss training. So you go and get our fat loss specialization. But the problem is if that Gen Pop is completely novice and new to strength training, that training program won't work because they don't know how to lift.
Well, except for the novice one.
The novice version will work.
Well, yeah, the novice version, which is there for the purpose that I'm explaining.
Yeah.
But so let's say you take like the classic German body comp. If you do this with a novice, it won't work. They don't know how to lift. They don't know how to recruit muscle. They don't know how to generate output. So that program won't do anything. So for that trainee, well, maybe that the best transformation programming system would be the foundation, because the foundation is what allows you to learn to lift weights, to make strength training something somewhat effective for changes in body composition.
But it's also easier to have them teach them nutrition, like good nutrition during that period, so that when they enter one of those specialization phases, then at least they understand how to apply the nutrition properly.
Yes, because if you really want to maximize the effect of the fat loss specialization, your nutrition needs to be on point, because the training is brutal. But the advantage of that is the training is so brutal in a volume perspective that it will allow you to maintain muscle mass and lose body fat while not needing to be in a crazy caloric deficit. So for people seeking long-term changes in body composition, this is what I would suggest, because it doesn't solely rely on reaching a 20 to 30% deficit and then hoping that the client would stick to it and then not rebound once the freaking phase is done and now they're hungry, right? So I'm a big believer in this, but only once the client is ready to go through it.
But a lot of coaches do use those types of training with Gen Pop and get results, but I think it's purely just like your client is then exercising more, so intensity has picked up, but it's definitely not optimized for long-term
Okay, but
success.
let's be real though. The client gets results. if they're doing GBC at minimal output with a empty barbell for 10 reps of squat twice a week and they're having results, it's not because of the training. It's because they're following some nutritional plan.
Yeah.
But the way I always look at this overarching question is, do you want a client for 12 weeks or do you want a client for years?
Yeah.
Because if you just learn the specializations, that's great, but they're specializations. They're short term. They're not something you're going to train a client with year round. So learn the basics first, get really good at the basics, and then use the specialization as needed. But yeah, like the level one's always going to win out in that, because that's how people should spend at least 75% of their time training.
Yeah. Okay. How can I get the look of a CrossFitter with machine back safe training? So I'm going to break it down. I'm pretty sure this person is a little bit broken, can't really lift that hard or doesn't feel safe outside of machine lifting, but wants to get hypertrophy and look athletic. Because to me, when you say CrossFitters, it's that, well, it depends on what CrossFitter. You're very muscular. You're athletic looking because you are doing a lot of those movements.
As long as all you want to do is look like a CrossFitter but not do anything that CrossFitters do,
your nutrition is
then you can just do everything else that CrossFitters do, but avoid anything that stresses or overload the lower back, and then replace these by quote unquote safer machines. But if everything else for your upper body or anything that doesn't stress your lower back, you can do more CrossFit-y type of exercises, at least you'll get
no matter what, it's
going
to take work.
Yeah.
It's going to take work with your nutrition. If you're limiting yourself on how hard you can train because you have issues, your nutrition is going to play a huge role to lean out. CrossFitters are extremely well conditioned. And
they also do a lot of different movements. They do gymnastics, they do Olympic lifting. To get that look, you have to do all those things. Like if you only train on machines, you'll look more like a bodybuilder than you'll look like a...
Yeah, you're never going to have that dense spinal erectors from all the Olympic lifting, high volume lifting.
Yeah.
Like that's just...
They do push-ups on their hands.
No, but you can still get close to that look. It's just that you won't be able to do what they can do because you're not prepared to do that. Yeah. So, for example, if that person's back is so messed up that every time they try a back squat, they're only back squatting 65 pounds. Yeah. Well, they're not going to develop anything in the lower body. So maybe that person for the squat pattern could use the pendulum squat, for example. The back is supported. Now they can drive a shit ton more output from their legs and grow their legs that way. But will they be able to do all the crazy stuff that CrossFitters can do with their lower body? Probably not, because now they're missing the co-contraction element of the 244 muscles involved in back squatting. But at least they're building mass in the lower body to look more like a CrossFitter. But if at least they can do other movements with the upper body or lower body that does not challenge the low back, they're getting some of that effect.
Yeah. But it's still like a bodybuilder looks like a bodybuilder versus an athlete looks like an athlete. So if you're not doing athletic things, you're not going to have that look. Versus
you're going to you're going to struggle to develop the delts and the traps for the same way as like all the Olympic lifts. The spinal erectors are never going to really develop out as much. Like it's just it's just one of those you can obviously add a lot of mass on machines, but it's going to be way more of a bodybuilding look like Alex is saying. Yeah. You're just not going to have that robustness. But it's also, you have to realize that most of the high level CrossFitters are also on gear. So you're not going to look like that anyway.
No, that's a good point. But
a lot of people don't know that.
It's just hard sometimes because obviously that dude is gifted genetically to look the way he looked. But let's just take Michael Jai White, the actor. Mm-hmm. So you could argue that maybe he lacks a little bit of lower body size, but... You could argue that this dude kind of looks like a bodybuilder,
little one.
Maybe I don't really know what his training looks like, but maybe he potentially trains like a bodybuilder. But this guy is a martial artist.
But you think he looks like a bodybuilder?
Well, I mean, fuck, he's pretty developed. I'm not saying he looks like.
For me, he looks more athletic. I mean, this is not technical.
Okay. He doesn't look like today's ridiculously enhanced bodybuilders, but he, like, to me, he's more jacked than Frank Zane ever was. You know what I mean? So it just depends which era of bodybuilding you're comparing it to. But he, despite of his training, because I wouldn't be surprised that his training looks bodybuilding-ish. But the reason why he moves athletically, although he kind of looks bodybuilding-ish, is because he trains martial arts 15 to 20 hours a week to maintain his athleticism. So if that person with the bum back does a little bit more machines for the lower body to get some mass, but outside of that, he's doing some athletic stuff that doesn't mess up his back, well then, as he's gaining mass, he'll still move athletically because he keeps being athletic. Yeah. It's the same thing. Remember when I trained Steven Jackson? Man, remember that shirtless pic in 2010, like when he did that Rawlings commercial?
Yeah, but he doesn't look. See, to me, he still looks athletic. Like he's jacked.
No, but you say this because he moved athletically.
Well,
but
I mean, that's part of it.
You ask him to do a front lat spread or a front double bicep.
Looks like a bodybuilder.
It looks like he had the small waist, the huge V taper, the broad shoulders, big peak on the bicep. So I don't know. Like I don't know how to define what's the bodybuilder look because we're all thinking about the bodybuilders of today. Looks like
they look just blocky. Like they have the weird. They almost have because bodybuilding is all about being freaky.
But is But is that their training or is it more the ergogenic drugs. Aids?
Yeah. I think it's whatever. But like compare The Rock to Michael Jai White. The Rock looks more like a bodybuilder than Michael Jai White.
Yeah, but The Rock probably has like 35 pounds and about 5 inches over.
I guess it's for me. Like the way they move is different because they're stiff. They're like. They don't do athletic things.
But so look at Casey Viator. Like now I'm like rewinding to the 70s, 80s. Like Arthur Jones, the inventor of Nautilus, took this guy under his wing. And Casey Viator, I don't know what he did previously, but for a chunk, he was just doing machines. But he was still somewhat athletic because he still did a bunch of activity outside. So he didn't have that blocky look, although like the muscle bellies were pretty significantly developed. So it's just hard. I think that some people view looking like a bodybuilder more like moving like a bodybuilder.
Yeah. Slightly off topic, but is Frank Zane the most overrated bodybuilder in your opinion?
I know people love him, but to me it was always like, what? The 165-pound guy on stage? I mean, I don't. But he has the aesthetics, like Flex Wheeler had the aesthetics. I don't know. To me, sorry for all the Frank Zane fans, but never did it for me.
Okay, we'll just try to blast through a couple more questions. Minimum tonnage for accumulation 1 phase.
Well, okay. That's so. Is that person talking about actual tonnage or theoretical tonnage? Because if it's actual tonnage, there is no minimum tonnage because tonnage is a reflection of the strength you have. So
theoretical.
If you're like a 80-pound dude training your ass off, the tonnage won't be really high, but the stress on that 80-pound guy might be a lot of hypertrophy.
Then what was their tonnage before starting this hypertrophy macro cycle? Like if they're coming from doing zero work, your tonnage can be really low and still get a hypertrophy response because you're introducing a new stressor. If your tonnage was really high, you're probably going to have to go and push beyond that. Like it really depends.
I will say as a generalization on a theoretical tonnage perspective, if you want to focus on hypertrophy, it should fall between 2,000 to 5,000 ish. Any less than this, on a theoretical tonnage perspective, won't. I'm not saying it won't work, but it won't magnify the training results.
And that's talking about the A series.
The A series, the big primary compound multi-joint movement.
Don't ever program machine presses, rows, etc., like hammer strength rows, for example.
But is that a statement?
We don't currently program any of that because we don't have those machines. We don't know who, like if we're writing a program, like a generalized 12-week macro cycle that's getting sold online, we don't know what machine access people have. So we use the gym here as a base model based on
just
the
like
equipment.
a standard row.
Yeah, and we try and not be hyper specific with certain pieces of equipment because it's way easier to say a 45-degree incline press than a Hammersmith dual ISO fucking triple extension press.
Like, I love machines. I think machines are great. I also love barbells and dumbbells. I love mixing both. I like both of it. But I mostly like to use machines on exercises where barbells and dumbbells are not super efficient. Then I think that machines bring a super cool add-on to the mix. But generally speaking, unless you have some type of condition or whatever, if I'm doing a press, most of the time I'll choose the dumbbell press over the machine press, just so I don't need to have my athletes fixed in a single motor pattern that can potentially lead to pattern overload syndrome. So I'd much rather use dumbbells where they can go through a bigger range of motion if they want to. They can follow the arm path that suits their biomechanics. So I love dumbbells in general for movements like this. But hey, if it's an accumulation phase and I blasted the A series with a big compound lift and I just want to trash the muscle and not over focus on stabilizing lifts and all that stuff, well, then hammer strength machines are great. But like Pork said, the only reason why we don't mention those, they're not in our gym. So we cannot have a YouTube video of a machine press if we don't have that machine press.
Yeah, and we know the chances are lots of gyms won't have it either, but all gyms should at least have dumbbells. So we're going to program what is most likely going to be accessible to as many people as possible. Like, we get shit for fucking putting lion leg curls in a program. People don't have that machine, never mind fucking hammer strength incline press.
Yeah, it's like the same, like people say, oh, Steph, like you don't like the hack squat machine. No, it's fine. I don't have it. We don't have every piece of equipment in the world.
Yeah.
For a goal of functional hypertrophy, how to choose the accumulation phase outside of upper, lower.
So how to choose a training split. For functional
For an
hypertrophy.
accumulation phase of functional hypertrophy.
For functional hypertrophy, I would still highly recommend an upper lower split. I think it's going to be the most beneficial. If you want to drive a little more frequency for the upper body, you can do the funky split that we sometimes do, which is it changes on a week-to-week basis. So it goes day 1, chest and back. Day 2, lower body. Day 3, arms and shoulders. Day 4, posterior chain. Day 5, chest and back. Weekend off. Day 1, arms and shoulders. Day 2.
No, day 1 would be lower body.
Oh, lower body, you're right. Sorry. Lower body, arms and shoulders. Day 3 off. Day 4 is posterior chain.
Chest and back.
Chest and back. This is hard off the top of your head. Then day 5, posterior chain. Then weekend off. Then starting week 3, you go arms and shoulders, lower body, chest and back, posterior chain, arms and shoulders. So your upper body lifts get 4 exposures, your lower body lifts get 3, but you're probably safer off sticking with upper lower.
Yeah, and these specialty splits would be more relevant if that accumulation phase you're really trying to drive volume.
Yeah.
But if you're really, really, really trying to drive volume to the point where you would need these splits, you're most likely not training functional hypertrophy. You're most likely training hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Now, the only exception would be to use these funky splits with moderate volume in the context of someone who tends to recover poorly from accumulation sessions. So this could be somebody that's advanced, high training age, very strong, whose recovery gets affected by volume. So then you could use these splits.
Yeah, and then if that was the case, I'd probably lean into more of a 4-day a week one anyway and go like the chest and back, lower body, day off, arms and shoulders, posterior chain.
Yeah.
I think that's still, if in that case someone's super strong, it's going to be more beneficial.
Yeah. Then there's even the option for people that the recovery is even more affected. You go something like chest and arms and back and shoulder. So big upper body muscle with smaller upper body muscles combined, that eases the recovery curve even more.
When would you recommend setting protein goal above body weight? So before you tackle this one, I just want to bring it back to what we did say earlier is
As you get older.
Well, as you get older, and also a lot of the times the protein goal might be higher because of the peri-workout nutrition. So you're just looking at the protein goal standalone from your meals and food. But outside of that, when would you also drive it up?
So as you get older, the protein goal increases. And if you're in a caloric deficit, the bigger the deficit, the higher you want your protein goal to. So,
which we don't recommend for hypertrophy. So we're talking about this on hypertrophy episode.
Yeah. So the deficit will keep for fat loss, but for hypertrophy,
just older populations.
Yeah, older populations. Really.
I think
Because
it's
more
also
anabolic to do carbohydrates. So if you're limiting, if you have a set amount of calories and you want to drive carbohydrates, well then, you're going to have to keep the protein a little on the lower end.
Yeah. And then it's also depending on the client sometimes with the macros. Like if it's someone that does track and then they're realizing I like having more protein, like they make sure, but it's just having those fuel calories from the carbs and the fats that, especially for females, that fat level is usually an amount that you do want to still hit and pay attention to.
What gets tricky sometimes too is some of the information on protein intake and hypertrophy come from enhanced lifters. Yeah. So these guys, because their muscle protein synthesis mechanism are turned on 24/7, they will synthesize more protein, so they can afford to eat more protein and benefit from the extra protein. Whereas the natural lifter, there's a limit to how much the protein will affect the muscle protein synthesis. You still need ample amount of protein for like immune components and like other hormonal processes, but on a muscle protein synthesis perspective, to go like north of 1.5 becomes a little irrelevant if you're non-assisted.
We have one final question for Alex.
Uh-oh.
How many carrots in a cup a day do we need to maximize the expression of jackness?
I usually go for like 5 carrots a day in my cup.
I like how it's not dependent on the size of the carrot.
Yeah, depends.
Yeah, they're all huge carrots.
Depends
no
how
baby
many
carrots.
like stuff in there.
Yeah, no baby carrots.
No baby carrots.
All carrots.
You got to get real carrots, not the baby.
You got to
carrots.
wash them. Okay, I know we discussed it a couple times on the episode. So we have our online hypertrophy specialization course, and then we also have our 2-day in-person live body composition seminar. So in that, we are focusing on body composition training, a little bit of a spin towards hypertrophy or fat loss and how to manipulate those things. So our next, that'll be coming up soon, April 12th to the 13th and October 4th to the 5th for the body composition seminar.
See you then.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your questions.